Welcome into another podcast of Just Like Us. I'm your host, Justin Bird. This is my lovely lady co-host, Leti Zito.
Hello, everyone. Welcome in.
Welcome in, y'all. Welcome in. Thank you guys for joining us. And for those who are catching the replay, thank you for joining us as well. So today we are going to be talking about the subject of being locked up spiritually, mentally, and physically. This one is extremely cool and extremely valid in my because in my experience, yes, because it's actually a touchy subject, but it's going to be a good topic to discuss because being locked up doesn't necessarily mean that you're behind bars. Prison isn't always bars. It's not. We build it ourselves. Really, freedom is a mindset. I could say this through experience that just because I'm free and out of prison doesn't mean that I can't be, in behind bars in my own mind. So yeah, we're gonna dive into this and talk about being locked up in our own mind or even behind bars. So welcome in, and to anybody who joins us right now, feel free to chime in and leave some comments. Let us know how you guys are feeling about this subject, and yeah, let's dive into it. Okay, so mentally locked up, addiction and toxic cycles become a prison. And I've been there for both of these, literally, psychologically, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I feel like I've had my fair share of being locked up. And the first time I was ever locked up was 13 as a kid. And it kind of just like went downhill from there. I just kept going and going and going and going and going. And if I had to count how many times I've been locked up, it's probably close to 50, 60 times, like legit. You know what I mean? Like
from 13.
From 13. Yeah. I mean, I've been locked up a lot and I'm not proud of that. By all means, I'm saying like this is not something I'm proud of at all. But it was life experiences. You think after, first 10 times or so, you think I learned, but I lived on the edge, so to speak. I did some crazy things that got me in a lot of trouble. And, being locked up, I got so much value from it because I chose to, I wasn't just sitting there doing time. I was allowing myself to learn and, really get the most out of it. Because I remember when somebody saying, when I got to prison, that there's a lot of people who just kind of sit there, people that just sit there in prison and they don't really program, they don't really do better for themselves, they just kind of are, they're in there and they just stay there, and so for me it was really it was a time to learn. And again, like for what a crazy place this place, what a crazy place. Yeah, I'm kind of everywhere on this because I've had so much time behind bars. And one of the things,
what was the longest stint behind bars?
the longest I ever had, like altogether, was 18 months. That was when I went to prison. I went to prison in 2000. I want to say 2004, I think. And I'll never forget the experiences I've had in there because I made the best of them. There were some wild things that happened in there that I don't necessarily want to talk about, but I will tell you this: one of the worst things was the smell of pee. Like no matter where you went, it was like you couldn't escape it, no matter what. And I remember I had a cellie one time that he said his rule, it was his house, so he thought he was doing some time, he was doing life, and his rule was, first when I first got in there in prison, it was like paperwork, like okay, got it, where's yours? So we checked each other's paperwork just to make sure that that things are on the up and up. And in prison, when you go there, as long as people aren't like, they don't have any like thing against childs or women kind of thing like this, that's frowned upon heavily in prison. So you show them what you're in there for, they show you what you're in there for or what they're in there for. And so I got in there to this other guy's room, and he's a lifer, he's not getting out. And one of the things he said was like, okay, so I got some house rules, I'm never leaving here. When's your how long do you have? And I told him I got 18 months. He said, okay, that's gonna be the last time we talk about when you're getting released. I was like, fair enough. And so after we discussed that, he said, I have some house rules. You sit down to pee. And I was like, explain, let me know what do you mean? And he's like, okay, so there is a ratio, it's a hit and miss rule. When you pee from 2 feet away from this sitting water, the pee, a lot of that majority that's going to splash up, and I don't want to be living with other men's pee in my home. I'm going to be here for the rest of my life. You get to go home. So those are the rules for my house. And I was like, fair enough. And so that's kind of like, how the house rules were, and it was understandable. This guy's never going to leave home. He's never going to leave that spot right there. That's going to be his cell till he dies. And I could respect that, and I didn't tell him when I was getting released after that. We didn't talk about this. So I kind of understood the mentality, of having another cellmate that's going to be there for life. And there were some things in there that really, they stuck with me, talking to people about, again, your release date. And I remember this guy telling me he had 2 life sentences plus 90 years. And I didn't know what to think about that. I actually I was terrified, not of him, but of like the life itself, of like being in prison, like how mentally you really have to prepare yourself to be okay with living. Like I would feel like, man, why would you want to live if you're in prison? But then being there, it's like, it's still life. You still have life. You still have, you can still make connections. You could still talk to people out in the street. But man, what a dark place this can be, because there's a lot of power in there. People that want power and like this. So I learned being locked up that it is not for me. I am not meant to be a bird in a cage, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, none of that. It wasn't a place for me. Granted, as a kid, I went to kid prison, and but I got a lot from when I got locked up. I wasn't just, I did learn. I had a lot of programming. There's a lot of programming that I did as a child. I mean, as like a teen and as an adult. And that's probably one of the things that helped me get through some of my locked up mental times of being locked up with, substance and using and stuff. So because I programmed, and I do have the steps to be able to make things happen on my own instead of having to reprogram. And I do have the steps. And just because I haven't always applied them at the proper times, the right times, doesn't mean that they're not still up here. So being locked up to me isn't just about being behind bars or being in a cell or not being free. I've been locked up while using. I literally have been locked up and like a slave, literally, like, no, not literally, but to the drug world. I sold it. I did it. I lived it. And that was my life, was like substance. And so, and I was like what you could call a slave to that. It was a monkey on my back. It was more than a habit. It was like an addiction. It was something that it wasn't easy to rid of. And once you get into that world, it's easy to get wrapped up in it, because there's several things that occur that you don't want to stop feeling, that you don't want to go back to, whatever the case is. I became a slave to that. So I was not free by any means. I was totally under the control of this substance, and I was the one that was holding myself prisoner. I had the ability to not go get it, to not go, however I used it. I had the ability to do that. And, God has ways of working through us. And I feel like it was my calling for me to go through what I went to be here, whether that's a cop out or not. I just feel like for me, it was a way for me to get where I am now, to be able to have the experiences to show, to tell, to be able to, elaborate and to share with you guys, to say, hey, this is what I went through, and you don't have to go through that and be locked up physically or emotionally or mentally. And I feel like I'm going to be that beacon that a lot of people will utilize. I feel like I'm stepping into my calling, into that light, so to speak. And I think God's working through me right now to help people. And I feel like that's my calling, is to be a leader, a teacher, a coach, whatever the word is that you want to call somebody who guides people. I feel like my positive energy and the way I am is going to help people through things that they're going through as well.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yes. I didn't go in and out of, kid prison. Like, I've never been to juvenile hall. I went to jail one time for 12 hours, worst 12 hours of my life. For me, though, I was in a mental prison for most of my life. I wasn't physically behind bars, but mentally, I put myself there. I by my thoughts, what I thought about myself, often kept me locked up. And sometimes I'd open the door and let myself out, but most of the time, I was so enslaved by the outward, right, the external forces that controlled, what people thought about me, what people said about me, what I said about me, right? Kept
Right.
me locked up in my own head, caged up, and I think resisting, help, because when you're locked up like that, it's hard to accept help. It's hard to help yourself or
Right.
even
Yeah.
know what you need help with. I mean, I knew pretty early on that I was in this loop, this like cycle, and I didn't know how to break free. I tried religion, I tried therapy, I tried so many things and just could not, get free. I'd experienced some freedom, and maybe it was fear. Maybe I was afraid of that freedom, to come out of the prison that I had built in my own mind. And, I had to start thinking new thoughts. That's where it starts. We start with a thought, and then, it turns into talk, and then it turns into an action. And your mind will fight you on this.
Mm.
It will
Yeah.
say, "Ooh, no, 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 no. This isn't how we normally do it." And you have to kind of like, not kind of like, you have to talk to yourself and say, "But we're trying a new way, right? That I know it's uncomfortable,
Yeah.
but let's try it. Let's see how it works." And it was excruciating. It was really painful. It was like, you know, going for it and then going 10 steps back, and then, continuing to go for it and going 20 steps back, right? But I just kept at it. I was like, if I could have these new thoughts, right, then I can talk about it, and then I can start acting it. So for me, the way it worked for me is I just started to do the opposite of what I would usually do, and it takes practice. I mean, right now I'm struggling with some of that in my mind. I'm seeing some cycles and some patterns, and I'm thinking of ways to disrupt them. And right now my old self wants to come in and say, protect myself and say, just do it like this. And it's not working, and like what you talked about, how many times do I have to keep doing it? As many times as it takes,
Right. Yeah.
until you can break through.
Right.
And I know that breakthrough is possible because
Right.
I've done it in a lot of areas,
Right.
of
Yeah.
my life. And, I'm so grateful for people who have, stood by me like while I am processing that. Cause I know it hasn't always been easy. It hasn't even been easy for me. Imagine being me having to, deal with all these patterns or these things that I'm seeing. Right.
Right.
But I know it's like you said, relying on God. I stopped resisting, his call on my life, and I started to say yes. And I was afraid, and I'm still afraid, but I'm here, and I show up. I show up for myself, and I show up for other people too, but I think most importantly for me right now in my life is showing up for me, and saying
Yeah.
no to things that, aren't in alignment with where I'm headed,
Right. Yeah.
and freedom, you have the key.
Yeah.
You've always
Yes.
had the key. That's why
That's
I was
right.
like, wow, I've always had the key. I'm the one who kept opening the door and then closing it, and opening the door and then closing it because of fear,
Right. Yeah.
right? Because it was unknown. This is how my grandma did it. This is how my mom did it. This
Right.
is
Yeah.
how
Right. Yeah.
everybody did it, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so to do this new thing, and break these generational cycles or karmic cycles, with same difference, whatever you want to call it, whatever you're comfortable with calling it, you know, it starts with you,
Yeah. Straight
you
up. Yeah.
know.
And
Yeah.
there's another locked up as well. It's spiritually locked up. And let me just say that like resisting faith and purpose
Mm,
keeps us lost, in my opinion. There were several years, after I got out of prison, where I had this mentality or this thought or this idea
mm,
that I was God, And I know this may sound crazy, call me nuts, whatever, but I had to, if I'm here, I'm in this experience, what if I made this experience and I'm like, I got everybody here and you guys aren't really real. And I had this whole mentality, idea, thought, and I kind of, it's shifted from time to time. Like, the Bible's not, what is said. And so, it could be controversial, but this is just kind of what I went through, in my years. Because when I was in prison, believe you me, I was as faithful as you could be. I read the Bible, I prayed every day and I believed in God. But what do they say? There are no atheists in foxholes, meaning, when you're about to die, when you're close and bullets are whizzing by your head, you're going to be, please God, save me. Right. But the whole, I think something I learned today too was, you don't want to get an umbrella as it's raining. You want to have one before it's raining, so you're prepared. You want to be able to dig a well hole and have water, not when you're thirsty, but before that, so you can be prepared. And so, spiritually being locked up, meaning, you don't have the faith, because what they say in the Bible says, those who are lukewarm is worse than hot or cold, meaning, and that's kind of where I was at for several years of, of my life. And a lot of that stemmed from using and like being, so to speak, in the darker side of things with I guess you could say demons and whatnot. Because I mean, in that world of use and when you're using substance and things, like, let's just say it how it is. That's not God's world. He doesn't want us to put this poison in our body and have this temple be, forsaken by this poison. And so it's the devil's work in a sense. And then again, I don't mean to say that like, in any other way than other than it's the dark entity that's working that into us and allowing us to not be our fullest potential, I feel, in my opinion. So spiritually locked up is just as powerful, because not having faith in our creator or whatever it is that you believe in, there's a side to that I feel is really, it could be daunting to not have, somebody to look up to, because I don't have all the answers, but I know who does, and it may not be in my time, but it may not be in the time that I'm looking for, but God's timing is perfect. And I feel like where I'm at right now, I'm in the perfect time for me to be fully myself. So that's what I'm doing, is I'm preparing myself to be more and more healthier and become more and more to light for who I am. And that who I am is not the who I am when I'm using. It's not the who I am when I'm drinking. It's not the who I am when I'm not praying, when I'm not faithful. Because to be honest with you guys, like, I've recently just come back into praying and being with God and stuff. Ask Lady, like, I just, like, not too long ago, I was like, I'm this, I'm that, and then really, I'm just being honest. Like, I thought I knew more than I did, but now I have a better understanding of what I need to do, and being, in God's footsteps is where I need to be. Is following my Creator and being, being able to learn and have Him teach me by me being coachable, so to speak, and have Him, I want to do His work. I want to do God's work. I do, and I feel like that's my calling, is to be here to help people out one way or another, and to do God's work. I really, really do.
Yeah, and I don't think it's just substances that keep us locked up, right? In a prison. It's behaviors too. You can get comfortable, like jealousy or envy or pride. Those things become a part of you too,
right?
And keep you in a loop of just the cycle of going around and around and around until you recognize it,
loop.
right? Yeah.
The poop loop.
Until you recognize it and start getting honest with yourself, right? Because we justify, we lie to ourselves. If something's hard, I know I do. If something's hard, I'm like, yeah, they don't know what they're talking about, and or this is just too hard, and so I'll want to give up really quick. But let me reframe that: not give up, but just kind of procrastinate on it, right? Until but then I just keep coming back at different, from different angles, or talking to other people helps give me a different perspective and look at it from a different view, not always the same view. I mean, we got to open ourselves up, right, to God, and because I knew I wasn't living right. I knew He was calling me, and He has been for my whole life, right? But I just kept thinking, oh, if I'm this good girl, and I, well, this this other part of me lived in there, right? But if I just on the outside portray, and cross every T and dot every I, that, life will go my way. Really. And what God was really after was my heart.
Mm.
That's what he was after. And my heart had been hurt so much in life from very, very early on, that, I had this skewed vision, and version of God. I thought, he was out to punish me, and, I had to suffer, carry your cross. And what I encountered, 3 years ago, when this journey started for me back in 2022, um, when I started to call out to God, and I didn't have, I couldn't even find my Bibles, I just wasn't in a good frame of mind. And so I just started using my words, right? Because in the beginning was the word. And so I didn't have, I could remember a few scriptures, but it was really hard for me to read during that time, or comprehend, or focus, or concentrate on things. So I just began to cry out to him, physically crying, and, curled up into the fetal position, just saying, and on my knees, and asking him to come in and help me. If you're really who you say you are, you see what I'm mentally going through, you see what I'm physically going through, and I need your help.
Right.
And I began to get ideas. And at first I was like, this just sounds crazy. You want to write? You start writing about it. Like, what is that going to do for me? Right. And I just began having conversations with God every night, like all night long, just having conversations with God, out loud. And if you had like a camera that was on me, you would have thought I was cuckoo, right? But hearing myself say those things out loud and write them down helped me start to process, what was really going on inside of my head and inside of my heart. And I started to embrace, I stopped resisting. I started saying, okay, God, I can let you in, like a little bit, just a little bit, or maybe just a little bit more, and he just busted the floodgates of my heart open, and I'm finding myself right now, if I'm being transparent, that my heart started to close, right? Because I perceived, some things going on that, I maybe had a large part to do with, right? It always comes back to us. It's never someone else's responsibility to make you happy, to make you mad, to make you sad, because it starts inside of you first, always. You don't want to give your, that the moment you give your power away to anything, whether it's a thought, a substance, a person, you lose control. And the only thing we have control over is ourselves. And I'm still learning that. I'm still learning what I am responsible for, what have control over. And, I don't do that by myself, and I don't have to unless I choose to. And that's always been kind of a pattern for me. I'll just do it myself, right? I don't need anybody. I can do this. But we don't have to do it alone.
Right.
We there's so much help out there for us, right? To get through these prisons,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And that other people, lost my train of thought again. Anyways,
Physically locked up.
thank you.
Yes.
Let's
When I was locked up
segue.
for 18 months, what it taught me was freedom is internal. Freedom is definitely inside of me.
It is.
I know
Yeah.
it sounds crazy, but breaking free
Yeah.
literally starts from within our hearts. our minds.
Mm,
You know, growth,
yeah.
accountability, and change. Those are the things that unlock doors. You know, when you're consistent,
Mm,
when you grow, when you hold yourself accountable and take, you know, responsibility for the things that you've done, those are the things that open up doors. They really are.
yeah.
You know what I
I
mean?
would
And
agree.
you know, the door is actually open. But the question is, are you ready to walk
Mm,
through it? That's the question. The door's open,
million
but
dollar
are you ready to
question.
walk through it? And on
Mm,
that, I want to say there are several people that I've met in my life that are so conformed to the prison lifestyle, physically, the physical prison,
mm,
that they can't help but keep going back. They get out, and it's just the lifestyle in there was, I guess you could say, kind of meant for them. And I don't mean that any other way, but how I'm saying it is like some people were just built for prison, you know, and that's
mm,
terrible because who wants to think like that? That's not a fact. It's just kind of what it's come to be for a lot of people. Some
mm.
people are not made to be on the streets, and that's in their mind. You know what I mean? That doesn't mean
Right.
that that's how it really truly
Yeah.
is. Some people just, you know, it's three hots
Mm,
in a cot. You don't have
mm,
the stress like you do out here. Because let's face it, there's so much stress out here in the world. If you had, I've thought about this as a prison.
mm,
Like, as crazy as it sounds, there are people in the world that have it that would probably kill to get into our prison system. And I know that sounds crazy. I'm not saying there's a whole bunch of them, but
mm,
just imagine if you think it's bad in prison. There's people who have it worse on the streets.
mm.
Seriously, like you mean the people in Somalia, people that don't have
Yeah.
three hots in the car that are fighting for food. I mean, this place is warm.
Mm,
It's controlled air, and I'm saying I'm just giving the different dynamics
mm.
and perspectives on like
Yeah.
from one end of the spectrum to the other. Because prison is terrible. Like I've been there. I know it's the worst place you could ever put me because I'm not meant for
Mm,
somewhere like that. I'm a bird. I'm supposed to fly. I'm supposed to be out here wearing nice clothes and doing different colors and being around
mm,
people. But some people, you know, I can't speak for them.
mm.
It just depends, man. It's just there's so many different ways to look at life, and for me personally, I find that my freedom is extremely important, and some people don't think the same. So doesn't mean they're bad, doesn't mean they're good. It just means that you know some people are built different, and my freedom is important, and so I like to be free mentally. So again, I have literally freed myself of so many things in the
Yeah.
past year that I find like that's powerful.
Mm,
For me personally, I find like I have a lot of power, a lot more power than I've been trained to think that I have,
right.
the taught that
Yeah.
I have. You know what I mean? Being powerless is
Mm,
like sitting in front of the phone and like, don't get me wrong, I'm no angel. I have my days where, you know, but I also feel like I have the power to do anything. That my son out there, this little boy, he can do anything.
mm.
There's two words he's not allowed to say. If he was in here, he'd tell you right now,
Yeah.
hate and
And
can't.
can't.
These are the two words he's not allowed to say. You can say them, but just don't say them around me because it's not true. You know, you can hate, but don't hate around me
Mm,
because that's one word is very powerful. That's something I frown upon him using and saying.
mm,
Even just I hate when that happens. There's something that
mm,
we just I teach him some things with this. Those are things I would like to train him, which I already
mm.
have. To set in his mind like you can do better without those words. Can't. I don't
Yeah.
even know what that means. Like you're not gonna hear me say can't. You're not. You're not. It's just something that I don't use. I don't like to use it, and he's definitely not going to use it if
And
I'm
I
around.
think, well, I think training your mind for freedom, right? If we, like for me, I trained it so long to be behind, the bars in my mind of, you know, life just doesn't work out for me. It wasn't always like that. I had, really happy moments too. And but I had to dig deep. I had to dig deep for those. It was almost like I couldn't allow myself to be happy. It was really weird. That's how my mind thought. If something good happened, it was like I was always waiting for that other shoe to drop. I couldn't,
Sabotage. You're
yeah,
like self-sabotaging,
yeah, I
huh?
couldn't enjoy it. It was like any minute now, right? Because that's a pattern. That's how it was, growing up. I started to, just focus on those bad moments happening, and it became a habit for me. Then I just started picking out all the negative things that were going on around me, and couldn't, and not that there weren't any good things going on around me, because there were, but I was having a hard time seeing them and maintaining them. Therefore, I was constantly in this loop of just like negative things happening, and I was the one creating it.
Right.
Right? I was the one creating that because that's what I was focusing on. Right? And when I started to shift and started to focus on the beauty around me and the good things happening in my life, more good things started to happen. And that doesn't mean, right, that unpleasant things aren't going to happen to you. They are, but we get to choose how we look at them and how we interpret them, right? We can always choose the better feeling. And I don't always do that. Like I said, right now I'm in a battle between me versus me, right? I'm looking at things from a negative perspective, and therefore it's just perpetuating more negativity, and I see it and it's coming up. But I'm also being kind and patient with myself,
Why do you think
right?
that is?
To-
Why you're thinking
Hmm.
in the negative? What do you think it is internal, or is it something outside of?
No. I don't think it's something outside. I mean, that might be what I'm telling myself, right? That it's something outside of me, but I'm in charge of, what goes on inside of me, right? And so I'm not sure if there's something that I'm not wanting to face. So I'm just kind of, writing about it and see what, comes from it so that I can deal with it, right? You can't heal what you don't acknowledge.
Right.
Right. And so that's where I'm at with that right now. But I know that it's not external because I can't control what other people do. I can only control what I do and how I respond to it.
Right.
And so it's getting to the heart of why am I, what's causing me to respond that way again, not, or react like that again. Why am I seeing it that way? Right. And it's just a pattern that needs to be interrupted. Right. And so that means for me, doing the opposite. And and I'm not here to like, I'm perfect. And, I struggle too, right? I struggle too, but I keep getting back up and I keep showing up for myself and not beating myself up when I, react in a way that I don't want to, right? I just keep going back to God and keep going back to God and receiving his mercy and his grace to get me through it. And so it's like what we said, true freedom, it does start within. You get to break free from those habits, but you have to
Mm.
recognize what the habits are, what the patterns are, what the loop is, so that you can interrupt that cycle
I actually
and
have.
start a new pathway in your brain.
It's interesting because as we were speaking this, I'm gonna be
Mm.
straight up with you guys,
Mhm.
100% authentic, transparent. As we were talking right now, as Lady was telling you guys what she's saying, and I after this podcast, me and Justin are going to go to this basketball game for my nephew's last senior basketball
Mm.
game, and for some reason, I was thinking about, I had this thought of going, and I had this is the first time I've had a feeling like this in quite some
Mm.
time. I wanted to drink a beer because and as she
Mm.
was talking, I was like, why did I just have that? I just
Mm.
went through something internally of like, why did I just think about this for the
Mm.
first time in months, literally?
Yeah.
Why did I just have that thought? And what
Mm.
that trigger thought was to me just now was associating, going with the people that I'm about to go see, not the basketball game, not anything to do with that, but
Mm.
hanging out with some of my buddies that we're still close. And I don't know why I decided to think about that, but it was
Mm.
Lady was talking, and I just had this thought of like wanting a beer. And this is the first time
Mm.
in many moons
Yeah.
that I thought about this, but it was something that just happened, and I repressed it. What's the word called when you I basically suppressed it, but
Mm.
I don't know if that's the word I'm looking for, because
Mm.
I didn't just sweep it under the rug. I mentally in my head, like, okay,
Mm.
I decided that this was something obviously I'm not going to do, but I wanted to know inside internally what made me think that. And
Mm.
I related this to past memories of hanging out with the guys I'm about to go hang out with, whether it be at a basketball game now or
Mm.
not.
Yeah.
And I was like, just like the smell of what I was that I would, and it's up to me. It's up to me. It literally is like I can have that thought, but having it go any further than that, it's up to me. I could absolutely turn that off after I had that thought. You know, I don't
Yeah.
even know what triggered it, but I just feel like, you know, having the idea of going with the old friends, I want to say that's what it could be, but it's up to me internally for me to be able to say I don't want that, nor do I need it, and I'm not going to go that route. But I just wanted to share with you guys the power of the mind. You know, it is really powerful. You know, I may want something, but I definitely don't need it, and I definitely don't want to go down that route again. And I feel like,
Yeah.
you know, it's something that I don't say it's going to last forever. I'm not. I have been struggling with like, oh, I want, you know, substance or even, you know, nicotine, or I
Mm.
mean, I'm past the nicotine stage like every now and again, you know, but really like even thinking about it, I'm just like, it doesn't disgust me, but it makes me think about how I am breathing and how much is it affected my body.
Yeah.
And I don't want these poisons anymore. I just don't.
Mm.
I won't go down that route. And it's up to me mentally to prepare myself, continue striving to move forward, and continue
Yeah.
to stay positive about it, because I owe myself and my liver, like,
Mm.
and I'm just gonna be really honest with you guys, like I talk to my body parts, and I think I really think this helps me. Like I'm like, you know, and I may not say it out loud, but I talk to my liver,
I
my
do.
kidneys. I do.
Yeah.
I talk to, you know, my tongue. I talk to like, and I know as crazy as it sounds, it seems to help because I've done so much damage to this
Mm.
body. I'm like, I mean, this is the one thing I need to take care of is myself. And by talking to these body parts and things, like the blood pumping to our feet and back is like, that's insanely like, I'm, you there's so much going on, and I'm just
Yeah.
appreciative of all the things
Yeah.
that are moving, these moving parts that are allowing me to be able to speak right now, to think, to
Mm.
walk, to stand up straight. I mean, I think we take so much for granted that I need to take more a lot better care of myself, and that starts from within. That means
Mm.
not bringing things in my body that I don't necessarily need. And I'm telling
Or
you right
into your
now,
mind.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm telling you right now that food is probably the harder one, most hardest so far that I can think of, as far as like, but that's not going to
Mm.
be that's not going to, you know, something that I'm not going to be able to overcome either. This is just another, I have a strategy for this too, and I just need to take it how I need to take it and not
Yeah.
fight it and force it. It just in time. But I don't want to have my heart clogged with, you know, this junk food before I'm like, man, I should have, could have, would have. So
Mm.
it's up to me right now to make sure that I set my goals and my realistic expectations for myself.
Mm.
I don't want to be on a hospital bed and like thinking, man, I should have ate better.
Mm.
I don't want to get cancer. I don't want to have these things that we don't want to talk about, that are taboo to even, you know, for us to even talk about. I really am a lot more aware and alert and
Mm.
conscious of what I need to do for me. And that's, I think, where it starts. So don't let yourself get too deep in the hole, or too, you
Mm.
know, don't get bad on yourself about things that you could, should, would do. Just, you know, take baby steps if you need. That's what I'm
Just
doing.
keep getting back up.
Yeah. I mean, I
Keep
quit
doing
4
it.
major things last year, and I'm very proud of that.
Mm.
And if I could do it, I know you guys can too. Not saying anyone is needing to do anything, but if I could quit these things, and if I could start doing better for myself, you guys can too. And we should be doing better by ourselves. And I think that's going to help with my mind, and also help with the love that I'm able to give to people. So on that note, if there's nothing else you got anything else you want to add?
I'm done.
Okay, so well, on that note, thank you guys for
Yes,
joining
thank
us on
you.
another episode of Just
Love
Like
you.
Us. We love you guys, and we will be live every Wednesday
And
at 5, every Friday at 5. Next week, listen up, y'all. Check this out. Next week is going to be epic. Okay, we're going to have our very first guests.
Mm.
As I say guests, because there's going to be more than one. Okay. And our next week is going to be epic. This is going to be our very first guest. And this is where we start bringing people in and getting, you know, other people's inputs and advice potentially, and just insight on what other people
Yeah.
are going through, and like what they can do to offer, you know, support and things like
Mm.
that. It's going to be awesome. Our next two guests, and at least our next one guest, is amazing. I'm not going to say who or what. I just want you to know, amazing. So y'all stay tuned for that. It's going to be next Friday. This Wednesday, you guys will see us this coming Wednesday. But next Friday is going to be our very first live in-person guests that we're going to have here on stage. So stay tuned for that, you guys. And until then, keep loving on each other, respect one another, and have fun with whatever you do. Thanks, you guys.
Yeah. Love you.
Peace.